Okay, another Mrs. H clip to help you with your exam techniques. This time it's on split brain patients, so biopsychology. And the question here from this sample paper was briefly explain how unusual behaviour in split brain patients could be tested in an experiment. So I've highlighted the word how, and that's the thing you've got to pick up on. So these exam questions are not just asking for straight recall of information you've learned. They want you to apply your knowledge. Okay, so you've got to pick up on these words like how, and whenever they use the word how, they're asking for what method. Tell me about the methodology used. So with split brain patients, and it's only for 2 marks, what we've got to get across is how is the procedure done. And the idea is that you would take the split brain patients and stick them in front of a screen, and the screen flashes up a word, for example, very briefly, very briefly on one side of the screen, so that this is just seen by the particular visual field. So for example, this information comes into our right visual field, but that is fed into the left hemisphere of the brain. And as we know, the left hemisphere deals with language. And so the first part of your answer would be telling us the methodology. So putting them in front of a screen, very brief, flashing up a word, for example. But then the second part is asking them to either say what they saw or to draw what they saw. Okay, and if it's gone into the left hemisphere, this patient, it's come from the right hand side, this the right visual field, this patient would be able to say what they've seen. Okay, but they would not be able to draw it with their left hand. This patient, though, has seen it in their left visual field. That's fed into the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is dealing with the left part of their body, the left-hand side of their body. So in this case, even though they would say that they'd seen nothing because they can't use verbal, they can't actually use words because that's been dealt with by the left hemisphere, they can actually draw what they saw. So 1 mark is some sort of procedure about flashing this up in front of them, and the second mark would be for asking them to either say what they've seen or to draw what they've seen with a particular hand, for example, okay, to illustrate the understanding of the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere controlling left part of the body. In this case with language, left hemisphere is dealing with language. So if we look at the mark scheme, we had 2 marks for something that's nice and clear but brief, and they've suggested in the mark scheme plausible experimental situational setup. So for example, the split visual field, there's the expression we want. You could have dichotic listening, you could just have specific stimuli like visual stimuli like a word or a face, as we've got here, which is probably just nice and easy. And then a plausible task for the patient. In other words, they're asked to then give a verbal response or a drawing response, something like that. So that's how you get your 2 marks.